It is perhaps the most distinctive opening chord in the history of radio rock. One strum, a suspended D major chord that rings out like a church bell for the secular religion of nostalgia. Before the drums kick in, before the raspy voice enters, you are already there. You are instantly transported to a specific place and a specific feeling. You can smell the asphalt melting in the heat. You can feel the vinyl seats of a cheap used car sticking to the back of your legs. You can taste the cheap beer and the first kiss. It is the sonic equivalent of a Polaroid photograph found in a shoebox, faded, saturated with color, and impossibly romantic. For 40 years, Summer of '69 has been the global anthem for looking back. It is the song that plays at every wedding when the tie comes off. It is the song that unites boomers, Gen X, and millennials in a drunken chorus at 2:00 a.m. in karaoke bars from Toronto to Tokyo. It is the soundtrack to the best days of our lives. But there is a problem with this memory. There is a glitch in the matrix of this perfect American summer. Do the math. Bryan Adams was born on November 5, 1959. When the summer of 1969 actually happened, the summer of Woodstock, the moon landing, and the Manson murders, Bryan Adams was not buying a real six-string at the Five and Dime. He was not starting a band with his friends. He was not getting his fingers bleeding. He was 9 years old. He was a child living in Portugal, the son of a Canadian diplomat, listening to the Beatles and dreaming of a life he hadn't started yet. He wasn't playing gigs at the drive-in. He was playing with toy soldiers. So what are we listening to? If the singer wasn't there, and the events didn't happen to him, what is this song? It is the greatest trick ever pulled in rock and roll. Summer of '69 is not a memoir. It is a myth. It is a fabricated memory so potent, so perfectly constructed, that it replaced reality. It convinced millions of people that they too had a golden summer where everything changed, even if they were born in 1975 or 1985. But the secret of the song goes deeper than just a fudged timeline. The 69 in the title isn't just a date. For decades, the songwriters have waged a quiet, polite war over what that number actually means. One writer says it's about the year. The other says it's about a sexual position. One says it's about history. The other says it's about the loss of virginity. This is the story of how a Canadian rocker and his songwriting partner sat in a basement in Vancouver and manufactured the ultimate American dream. It is the story of a song that fought its way onto the charts, survived critical dismissal, and grew into a monster that swallowed its creator's career. This is the myth of '69. It is an investigation into why we are so desperate to look back, and why the most honest songs are sometimes the ones that are made of lies. To understand the alchemy of this anthem, to understand how a song about an American summer was engineered to perfection, we have to leave the imaginary porch in the summer heat. We have to leave the Five and Dime and the drive-in movies. We have to travel north, across the border, to the cold, damp, gray reality of Vancouver, British Columbia, in the winter of 1984. This was not the summer of love. This was the winter of ambition. The music industry in the mid-'80s was shifting beneath the feet of rock artists. The raw, jagged edge of '70s rock, the Zeppelin, the Bad Company, the Free, was being smoothed over by synthesizers, drum machines, and the neon gloss of MTV. Rock stars were becoming video stars. Hair was getting bigger, sounds were getting processed. But in a basement apartment in the Kitsilano neighborhood of Vancouver, two men were trying to capture something ancient. They were trying to bottle lightning. One was Bryan Adams. He was 24 years old. He was scrappy, ambitious, and possessed a voice that sounded like it had been dragged through gravel and dipped in honey. He was a man in a hurry. He had tasted success with his album Cuts Like a Knife, which had cracked the top 10, but he wasn't satisfied. He was hungry. He wanted a masterpiece. He wanted an album that would stand next to the giants of the genre. He didn't want to be a flash in the pan. He wanted to be a lifer. The other man was Jim Vallance. If Bryan Adams was the voice and the face, Jim Vallance was the architect. A former drummer for the rock band Prism, Vallance had pivoted to becoming a disciplined, meticulous songwriter. He was the structured yin to Adams's spontaneous yang. He was older, calmer, and treated songwriting not as a mystical art form, but as a job. Together they were a hit factory of two. Their routine was unglamorous and grueling. They worked 12-hour days in Vallance's basement studio. They were fueled by endless cups of tea and sandwiches. They didn't have groupies hanging around. They had deadlines. They hammered out chords and lyrics with the intensity of scientists trying to crack the atom, looking for the perfect mathematical equation that equals a hit. They were working on songs for Adams's upcoming fourth album, a record that would eventually be titled Reckless. The mandate was clear. They wanted a song that captured the energy of the music they grew up loving. They wanted something that felt like the energetic, driving rock of the late 60s and early 70s. They wanted something that felt like Creedence Clearwater Revival or the Beatles, something that felt timeless before it was even recorded. One afternoon, amidst the noise of drum machines and synthesizers, Vallance picked up a guitar. He started playing a riff. It was a simple, chugging rhythm. Down, down, up, down, up. It was driving. It was relentless. It had a forward momentum that felt like a car accelerating onto a highway. Adams liked it. His ears perked up. He started ad-libbing over the top of it. They began to construct a story, best days of my life. It was a phrase they kept coming back to. But best days of my life is a cliché. It's a greeting card. They needed grit. They needed details. The lyrics began to take shape, and this is where the Frankenstein nature of the song emerges. They were drawing on a feeling, a composite of their teenage years. Even though Adams was too young to have experienced the summer of 1969 as a participant, Vallance was older. He was a teenager in the late 60s. He did have a band in high school. He did buy a guitar at a pawn shop. Not a five and dime, but close enough. So the song became a hybrid. It was a blend of Vallance's actual memories and Adams' rock and roll fantasies. They were blending the specific with the universal to create a memory that felt real to everyone. I got my first real six-string, bought it at the five and dime, played it till my fingers bled, was the summer of '69. The choice of the word five and dime was a crucial, calculated decision. It is a distinctly American phrase. In Canada, where they were sitting, they would have said Woolworths or the hardware store. But Adams and Vallance were smart. They knew they were writing for a global audience, which meant writing for an American audience. Five and dime had a rhythmic snap to it. It sounded percussive, but more importantly, it evoked a specific imagery. It sounded like a Norman Rockwell painting. It mythologized the purchase of the instrument, turning a transaction into a rite of passage. They populated the song with archetypes. Jimmy and Jody weren't necessarily real people. They were stand-ins for every listener's friends. Jimmy is the quitter. Jody is the one who settled down. The band is the symbol of lost youth. But as they wrote, a tension emerged, a creative disagreement that would ripple through the song's legacy for decades. Jim Vallance was writing about the year 1969. He was writing about the cultural shift, the end of the 60s, the feeling of change in the air. He was thinking about Vietnam, about Woodstock, about the moon landing. He was writing a period piece. Bryan Adams, however, had a mischievous glint in his eye. He kept singing the phrase, "Summer of '69," with a certain inflection. At the end of the song, the lyric changes. The narrative shifts from the band to a relationship. "Me and my baby in a '69. Vallance looked at him. Adams smiled. Adams wasn't thinking about the moon landing. He wasn't thinking about civil rights. He was thinking about the sexual revolution of a different kind. He decided, in the privacy of his own head, that the song wasn't about a calendar year at all. It was about a sexual awakening. It was a double entendre hidden in plain sight, wrapped in a nostalgic wrapper so convincing that radio sensors wouldn't even blink. To Adams, the '69 was a metaphor for the summer of love in the most literal sense. It was a joke he was playing on the world. They finished the demo. They had the riff. They had the narrative arc, from the purchase of the guitar, to the formation of the band, to the breakup, to the memory of the girl. They had the whoa-oh backing vocals. They thought they had a hit. They thought they had bottled the lightning. But the studio is a cruel place. When they took this carefully constructed anthem to New York to record it for Reckless, the magic simply vanished. The lightning refused to strike twice. With the demo tape in hand and high hopes in their heads, Bryan Adams and Jim Vallance headed to New York City. They booked time at the Power Station, a recording studio that was, in 1984, the Holy of Holies for rock music. The Power Station was famous for one thing above all else: drums. It was a cavernous, wood-paneled space that had birthed the massive cannon-fire drum sounds of Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA and David Bowie's Let's Dance. It was the place you went when you wanted your record to sound like it was being played by giants. Adams was teaming up with Bob Clearmountain, a producer and mixer who was essentially the architect of the '80s rock sound. Clearmountain was a perfectionist. He was a sonic surgeon who could spend hours tweaking the reverb on a snare drum until it sat perfectly in the mix. On paper, the equation was flawless. They had the song, a catchy, driving anthem. They had the studio, the best room in the world. They had the producer, the guy with the golden ears. It should have been easy. It should have been a victory lap. Instead, it was a car crash. When they tried to record Summer of '69, the song simply refused to come alive. They set up the band. They counted it off. They played it. And it sounded wrong. They tried again. It sounded stiff. It sounded labored. They tried speeding it up, and it sounded frantic. They tried slowing it down, and it sounded plodding. They tried different drum patterns, different bass lines, different guitar tones. The problem was the groove. In rock and roll, the groove is a ghost. You can't write it down on sheet music. You can't program it into a computer, at least not in 1984. It is the invisible friction between the instruments, the way the guitar pushes and the drums pull. And for Summer of '69, that friction was missing. The more they tried to fix it, the worse it got. They were overthinking it. They were trying to manufacture youthful spontaneity in a high-pressure, high-cost environment. It was the classic studio paradox. The harder you try to sound like you're having fun, the more miserable you sound. Frustration began to set in. The mood in the control room turned dark. Adams, who was usually a ball of energy, was ready to give up. He looked at the song that he and Vallance had loved so much in the basement, and he saw a corpse. He thought maybe it just wasn't meant to be. He was ready to scrap it, to relegate it to the B-side pile, destined to be a forgotten demo on a cassette tape gathering dust. But there was one person who refused to let the patient die. Jim Vallance, back in Vancouver, kept listening to the rough demos. He argued for the song. He insisted that the magic was there, buried under the layers of studio gloss. He urged Adams to keep trying. And then, A breakthrough happened. It didn't come from a new piece of technology. It didn't come from a fancy production trick. It came from subtraction. Adams realized they were building the house from the roof down. They were focusing on the drums, the bass, the electric guitars. But the heart of the song wasn't the noise. It was the rhythm. He picked up a Guild acoustic guitar. He walked into the tracking room. He told everyone else to stop playing. He stood there alone in that massive room designed for drums, and he played the opening riff again. Down, down, up, down, up. But this time, he didn't play it like a session musician trying to be precise. He played it like the kid in the lyrics. He played it like a teenager in a garage who just wanted to make some noise. He played it with a little bit of slop, a little bit of aggression. He attacked the strings. He let the pick scrape. Bob Clearmountain, sitting behind the mixing desk, heard it. He captured that acoustic track. It was percussive. It was driving. It breathed. That single acoustic guitar track became the spine of the song. They didn't bury it in the mix. They built the entire wall of sound around it. If you listen to the final record today, that acoustic guitar is the first thing you hear, and it remains the engine that drives the track forward. It provides the human element that the earlier takes were missing. Then came the vocal. Bryan Adams possesses a voice that is a distinct biological anomaly. It is often described as raspy, but that word is too gentle. It is a voice that sounds like it has been dragged through gravel, dipped in honey, and then set on fire. It has a natural, built-in ache. When he stepped up to the microphone to sing the final take, he tapped into something deep. He wasn't singing about 1969 anymore. He wasn't singing about a specific year. He was singing about his own struggle. He was singing about the years of rejection, the empty clubs, the record executives who told him no. The key of the song is D major, which pushes Adams to the very top of his chest voice. When he hits the chorus, "Those were the best days of my life," he isn't singing comfortably. He is screaming. He is hitting a high A. You can hear the strain. You can hear the vocal cords shredding. You can hear him reaching for the note and just making it. That strain is the secret ingredient. It is the sound of desperation. It is the sound of someone trying to hold on to a moment that is physically slipping away from them. If he had sung it perfectly, if he had sung it cleanly, it would have been a nice pop song. But because he sounded like he was fighting for his life, it became an anthem. The song was saved. It earned its place on the album. Reckless was released in November 1984. It was an absolute juggernaut of a record. It spawned 6 top 15 hits in the United States, a record at the time for a single album. Run to You, Heaven, Somebody, It's Only Love, a duet with Tina Turner. But here is the strange part of the history. Summer of '69 was not the biggest hit on the album. When it was released as a single in June 1985, perfectly timed for the summer radio season, it didn't go to number 1. It stalled. It peaked at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. The critics were dismissive. They called it derivative. They called it cheesy. They said it was Bruce Springsteen light, a Canadian attempt to copy the blue-collar poetry of the Boss. They saw it as a piece of fluff, a catchy earworm with no substance. By the metrics of the music industry, it was a good hit, but not a legendary one. It seemed destined to have a standard shelf life. 3 months of heavy rotation, a slow fade down the charts, and then a quiet retirement to the gold rotation on classic rock stations. But Summer of '69 had a secret weapon that no chart position or music critic could measure. It had a viral quality that existed before the internet. It had a hook that didn't just sit in the ear, it burrowed into the nervous system. It was about to prove that sometimes the audience is smarter than the critics. The afterlife of a pop song is usually predictable. It burns bright, it fades, and it eventually becomes a nostalgic curiosity played at 2 a.m. on an infomercial for a greatest hits CD. But the afterlife of Summer of '69 broke every rule in the book. It didn't fade. It calcified. It became a piece of furniture in the house of Western culture. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the cultural winds shifted in a way that perfectly benefited Bryan Adams. The baby boomers were aging. The 1960s were transitioning from recent history into mythology. Hollywood was churning out nostalgia bait like The Wonder Years, Stand By Me, and Forrest Gump. The world was collectively looking in the rearview mirror. Summer of '69 was perfectly positioned to ride this wave. It was generic enough to fit any memory, but specific enough to feel authentic. It didn't matter that the singer was Canadian. It didn't matter that he was 9 years old in 1969. The song created a shared memory space. Consider the lyrical archetypes. They are masterstrokes of vague specificity. Jimmy quit. Jody got married. Who are Jimmy and Jody? They aren't real people. Vallance picked the names because they sounded good rhythmically, but to the listener, they are intensely real. Everyone had a friend like Jimmy who gave up on the dream. Everyone knew a Jody who grew up too fast. The band that broke up? That is the universal symbol for every teenager's lost potential. The song became the Mad Libs of nostalgia. You could insert your own friends, your own town, your own first love into the verses, and the song still worked. Then came the bar, bands. If you have been to a wedding, a dive bar, or a corporate retreat in the last 40 years, you have heard a cover band play this song. Why? Because it is the ultimate floor filler. It is incredibly easy to play, 3 chords and a simple beat, but it is incredibly hard to play badly. It is bulletproof. It instantly unites a room. It gives the drunk uncle and the shy accountant permission to put their arms around each other and scream at the ceiling. And then, the final frontier, karaoke. Summer of '69 is consistently ranked in the top 5 most requested karaoke songs in the English-speaking world. It is a masterpiece of karaoke engineering. It has a long instrumental intro that allows you to build hype. It has a verse range that is accessible to the average singer. And it has a chorus that doesn't require singing. It requires shouting. It is a participation trophy in song form. As the years went on, the song began to eclipse the artist. Bryan Adams continued to have massive hits. Everything I Do It For You spent 16 weeks at number 1. But Summer of '69 was the cultural monster. It was the song that defined him. It was the song that, if he didn't play it, would cause a riot. But as the song achieved immortality, a crack began to form in its foundation. The debate over the meaning of the number 69 moved from a private joke to a public war. In the early days, everyone assumed it was about the year. It made sense. The song mentions a 5 and dime, a porch, a cultural vibe. But as Bryan Adams got older, and perhaps a bit more bored with the standard questions, he started to pull the rug out. In interviews, he became emboldened. He started to drop hints. He told curious journalists with a smirk, "A lot of people think it's about the year, but actually it's more about making love in the summertime. It's using 69 as a sexual reference." He claimed the lyric, "Me and my baby in a 69" was a double entendre. He suggested that the entire song was actually a dirty joke that had fooled the censors, the radio stations, and the soccer moms of America. Jim Vallance, the co-writer, was horrified. To Vallance, this was revisionist history. He was the serious craftsman. He had written a song about the Vietnam era, about the cultural shift, about the passage of time. He had poured his actual memories of the late 60s into the verses. To have his partner reduce their masterpiece to a sex joke felt like a betrayal of the song's integrity. It was cheapening the art. Vallance publicly disputed Adams's claim. He pointed to the original lyric sheets. He pointed to the line, "Standin' on your mama's porch," which suggests a specific, innocent time and place. He argued that the sexual interpretation was a joke Adams came up with years later to look edgy, to distance himself from the squeaky clean image of the 80s. This creative tension creates a fascinating duality in the song today. When you listen to it now, you are hearing two songs at once. You can hear the innocent, nostalgic ode to 1969 written by Jim Vallance, the song about the end of the American dream. And you can hear the cheeky, winking sex anthem sung by Bryan Adam, the song about teenage lust. The genius of Summer of '69 is that it accommodates both. It is an optical illusion of audio. It changes depending on how you look at it. It is deep if you want it to be deep, and it is dirty if you want it to be dirty. And that flexibility is exactly why it has never gone away. So we return to the central question, the glitch in the matrix. Is Summer of '69 a lie? If we are sitting in a court of law, under oath, the answer is undeniably yes. Bryan Adams was not a teenager in 1969. He did not buy a guitar at the Five and Dime. He didn't have a band called Nothing. He wasn't standing on a porch telling a girl he would wait forever. He was a child in Portugal, likely playing with toy soldiers and worrying about long division. But art is not a court of law. In art, there is a profound difference between factual truth and emotional truth. And by that standard, Summer of '69 is one of the truest songs ever written. It taps into a universal psychological phenomenon known as rosy retrospection. The human brain is a brilliant editor. When we look back at our past, specifically our youth, our minds instinctively filter out the boredom, the fear, the awkwardness, and the cold. We delete the hours spent waiting for the phone to ring. We delete the bad skin and the lack of money. Instead, we keep the highlights. We saturate the colors. We turn our own lives into a movie trailer. We remember the one great night, the one great kiss, the one great drive. Bryan Adams and Jim Vallance didn't write a documentary. They wrote a screenplay. They created a character, the quintessential rock and roll dreamer, and they gave him a backstory that we all wish we had. They understood that the specific year didn't matter as a date on a calendar. It mattered as a symbol. Think about the alternative. If Adams had been factually accurate, he would have written a song called Summer of '75. It would have been about being a teenager in the suburbs of Vancouver, listening to Elton John, riding the bus, and worrying about high school exams. It might have been honest, but it wouldn't have been an anthem. It wouldn't have carried the weight of history. By setting the song in 1969, Adams borrowed the cultural gravity of the most significant year in pop culture history. He tapped into the collective unconscious of the West. Even if you weren't alive in 1969, you know what it means. You know it stands for Woodstock, for the moon landing, for the end of innocence. By placing his fictional narrative inside that real container, he elevated a simple story about a garage band into a myth. The verdict is that the specific details, the Five and Dime, Jimmy, Jody, are not lies. They are vessels. They are empty spaces that the listener is invited to fill with their own memories. When you sing along to Jimmy Quit, Jody Got Married, You aren't thinking about Bryan Adams's friends. You are thinking about your friend who joined the army. You are thinking about your friend who moved away. You are thinking about the moment your own circle of friends fractured and adulthood rushed in. The song endures because it gives us permission to be nostalgic. It validates the feeling that the past was better, brighter, and simpler than the present. It gives us 3 minutes and 32 seconds to believe that we, too, were once that cool. That we, too, had a summer where the sun never set and the days lasted forever. The lie of the song is its greatest gift. It allows us to access a memory we never actually had, but one that we desperately need to believe in. Today, Bryan Adams is in his 60s. He is a distinguished photographer, a philanthropist, and a touring juggernaut. When he plays Summer of '69 live now, the dynamic has changed again. He isn't the young man screaming about the past. He is the older man celebrating it. He often stops singing the first verse. He lets the audience take it. And watching a stadium full of people, 50,000 strangers, scream, "I got my first real six-string," is a religious experience. It proves that the song no longer belongs to him. It belongs to the audience. It belongs to the couple who fell in love to it. It belongs to the drunk friends at the bar. It belongs to the kid learning to play guitar in his bedroom right now, trying to master that D major chord. The myth of '69 has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The song created the memory it was singing about. In the end, it doesn't matter that Bryan Adams was 9 years old. It doesn't matter if it's about a year or a position. What matters is the feeling. That D major chord rings out, and for a few minutes, the winter is gone. The job is gone. The bills are gone. It's summer. The radio is on, and we are all young forever. The best days of our lives aren't in the past. They are in the music. These are the stories that make the hits hit harder. If you want to keep exploring the truth behind the legends, the myths behind the melodies, and the secrets of the studio, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you in the next video.